and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the Taruk Makto himself. It's Mr. Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Oh, man, not good. I'm not the Taruk Makto anymore. I had to flee. I had to flee into the... Well, we'll talk about that later.
You just almost stumbled yourself right into spoilers in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, we're not gonna spoil.
This week on the show, Avatar: The Way of Water is finally here after 13 years anxiously awaiting for a new Avatar movie. And I say that unironically because I actually have been waiting for this for a very long time. And we are going to spend this episode, Matt, talking all about it. I can't wait. I think we've only kind of talked to each other about how we thought about this movie via message before, so I'm really excited about this conversation to really get into this movie with you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, obviously we did the whole Deconstructing Cameron series. We are extremely high tier James Cameron fans, I think it's fair to say.
That is true, yeah.
And so we have been looking forward to this, and
it's here. Oh my God,
it's
here.
A long awaited discussion.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to be spending the entire episode talking about James Cameron and Avatar and The Way of Water. We're going to do like a brief non-spoiler section at the very beginning of just to give our overall vague as possible thoughts of the film. Then we're going to really get into it, talk deep about spoilers and what we thought and our experience watching the film. And then Matt, because this is a James Cameron film, because every time we do a film, on a director we've covered on our Deconstructing Director series, we kind of call it like an addendum episode. And what I like to do is revisit the rankings that we made of those directors when we finished up that. So I want to revisit our Cameron ranking and kind of see where Avatar 2 fits into the ranking that we made. I think actually a year ago today, Matt, actually. It was almost exactly a year ago that we watched and talked about the original Avatar.
Perfect.
All right, let's get into it. Let's talk all about Avatar: The Way of Water.
Dad, I know you think I'm crazy.
Never mind those big rocks.
But I feel her. I hear her heartbeat. She's so close.
So what does her heartbeat sound like?
Mighty.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
Jake Sully lives with his newfound family formed on the extrasolar moon Pandora. Once a familiar threat returns to finish what was previously started, Jake must work with Neytiri and the army of the Na'vi race to protect their home.
No spoilers, but that's not really what the movie is about. Nope. But okay.
It's not great.
This movie was written by James Cameron, Rick Jaffa, and Amanda Silver, directed, of course, by Mr. James Cameron. It stars, returning in their roles, Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana. It also stars Sigourney Weaver and Stephen Lang, which I remember you and I talking about. How is that possible? Because they did. We will discuss that in spoilers. And Kate Winslet rejoins Mr. James Cameron to be in a role that it took me half the movie to realize that was Kate Winslet.
I'm sitting here going, oh yeah, she was in this movie. So that's bear that in mind, I guess. Yeah, that's funny.
All right, Matt, what did you think overall opinions, no spoilers? What did you think about James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water?
Well, I loved it. I thought it was absolutely delightful. I think it was what I wanted from an Avatar film. I think it surpassed my expectations. The story was a classic James Cameron emotional story. Mm-hmm. Zero complaints about the effects. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. And it was just, much like Avatar 1, it's more like an experience than it is just a film.
Sure.
and we can do a little bit more pre-spoiler stuff, but basically my uh, reaction to it was incredibly positive.
Yeah, I'm right with you on this. I deeply adored this movie. I loved it. I had so much fun with it. I cried, I laughed, I was completely blown away. I'm curious, how did you watch the movie? So did you see it in 3D? Did you see it in high frame rate? What was your method?
Um, I took the kids to see it, so that's one factor that was in play, and so I didn't have the sort of bandwidth to go out of my way to see it in any particularly special way other than 3D.
Mhm.
So it was 3D, which the kids were really excited about because honestly, I can't remember the last time we went to see a 3D movie. It just
The
seems like
last time I saw a 3D movie in a movie theater was Avatar. It was the first Avatar.
I know they've seen at least one before, but like it's just funny to me how it is almost always just a totally forgettable gimmick. But in this particular film, the 3D did make it just that much more immersive and immediate and fun. So yeah, I just saw it in a normal, relatively small theater, but it was fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it in 3D as well. I did not see it in high frame rate. I actually there's a conversation to be had about the high frame rate stuff. Unfortunately, I don't think you and I can really have it since neither of us saw it in that. I've heard very mixed reviews about how the high frame rate stuff works for people. I do know like my only real high frame rate experience was with The Hobbit back when that came out, and I did not enjoy it in that Hobbit movie. But
Mhm.
I also kind of believe James Cameron knows how to use these things correctly. The interesting thing is actually it's not just high frame rate; it was variable frame rate,
Mm.
Matt. Which means some of the sequences were projected in 48 frames per second if you went to those special theaters, and then some of the sequences were projected in the standard 24. But actually, the thing I read is that a projector can't do that. It can't change frame rate mid scene. So in the parts they wanted to do it in 24 frames, they actually just doubled up on the frames. So
Mm.
there's just two of the exact same frame, which brings the effect of a 24 frames per second thing. I don't know. There's definitely a conversation that should be had about that. We can't do it, but my understanding is it's used primarily for the underwater sequences in the movie. And when it is used in the underwater sequences, it really does enhance the experience. But again, we will not know that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I can't comment further, but it's
Sure.
kind of cool that I didn't know that actually. I didn't know that he was, he's always going to innovate,
Mhm.
obviously, but I didn't realize that he had been playing around with that particular feature.
Yeah, I mean, I think he calls high frame rate not. I forgot what his exact quote is, but it's not like a projection style. It's just another tool to be used in the arsenal. And so he
Hmm.
kind of the idea that I'm not going to make my whole movie shot at this frame rate, but in places where I believe it will expand the cinematic experience. That's what I'm going to do, and that's what he did. And I've heard some very mixed reviews about it actually, but
Hmm.
again, I didn't see it myself that way. And I agree with you on the 3D for the most. Like I didn't hate it. I didn't like. I wasn't like, yes, you have to see this movie in 3D. Like, I'm not going to walk out and say everyone that sees this movie should see it in 3D. If you can, great. If it doesn't work with your time, I really don't think you're going to miss anything if you skip the 3D.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with that.
But I love this movie, Matt. I loved everything it did. I agree with you that there was a certain amount of expectations coming into it. I think our episode a year ago really elevated those expectations because my revisit to Avatar last year made me fall in love with it more than I think I ever had. I've really loved it on that revisit, and I was very optimistic and hopeful about this movie, and it really didn't let me down. I think it's such a fun thing. It's James Cameron doing everything he does in
Hmm.
one big package. Like it really, to me, one of the things I thought about coming out of this is like, this is why I go to the movies, like to feel this way as I'm walking through the parking lot on the way to my car. Like I feel like elated and also a little sad and just in wonder. And I
Yeah.
think the thing that this movie achieves more than anything is that sense of wonder, that sense of awe. There is a whole 1 hour stretch in the middle of this 3 hour movie that you're really just standing with your mouth open at the things that Cameron accomplished in this film. And
Hmm.
and it's almost nothing to do with story beats. It's almost nothing to do with character. Not saying those two things aren't good and I didn't enjoy them in the movie, but it's just holy shit. How did he do that? the underwater sequences in this movie, no one has done CGI underwater shit like this ever.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
look at the fucking Aquaman movie. Look at the most recent Black Panther movie that had underwater sequences. They look like shit compared to this.
Yeah, I mean, this looks perfect, right? I mean, you can't notice anything wrong with it, which I'm sure some expert in CGI might be able to say, like, oh, well, when they splash into the water, the way the water deforms isn't perfect. But I'm like, I don't know, I can't notice that. So as far as I'm concerned, it's perfect. Yeah, the what you were saying about like just like the sense of wonder, I kind of made a note to myself to remember this for later. But like when I was in the movie, I regrettably I was checking my watch every once in a while just to kind of like make sure that the kids were okay, basically, like checking in on them and like being like, all right, it's been 2 hours, do I need to like see if they're doing okay? But anyway, the point is, like, it was 2 hours into the movie and I was like, I don't want this to end. I'm glad this movie has another hour left. There are words that I have never said at the 2 hour mark of a movie. Even other movies that I really love, by the way, like rarely are you like, I am just enjoying like living in this world and all the James Cameron has invited me into this world and I'm swimming around with these characters and I'm really into what's happening between them. And I just can't wait for the next evolution of the story.
It's interesting because the big, third act conflict action sequence is going to come, right? Inevitably. And this is no spoilers. There's inevitably going to be an action sequence in a James Cameron film. You know it's coming, and you're both elated that that you still have that part of the movie to look forward to, while also kind of dreading it because you're just so happy in the kind of magical serenity of the middle part of this film. It's just an absolute experience. Like my I don't know how much more we can go on without really getting into specifics, but my recommendation is everyone needs to go see this movie. Even if you don't end up loving it as much as we do, like, it's an experience. It's absolutely an experience. And if you haven't been to the movie theater in a while, if you haven't seen a big movie like this in a while, nobody makes movies like this. And it's worth seeing. Even if you don't end up loving it, it's worth experiencing.
It's, just before we move on from the no spoilers section, I just want to generally talk about the story and say, like, man, I've missed caring about what was happening in action movies. I'm not saying it never happens. I don't want to, because that would be false. Like, I know we've talked about a few action movies that have come out in the last few years that I liked and did care about what was happening. And cared about the characters and felt the drama, but not to this level. I have not been this invested and this emotionally hurt, frankly, like engaged with and jerked around by the emotionality of an action movie, right? And this should be no surprise because James Cameron is generally very good at this and he focuses on this and he knows exactly how to dial in the heartstrings, and that's why his movies are so memorable. That's why Aliens and Terminator 2 are these movies that at least you and I, they're like developmental touchstones for us that we think about and talk about and go back to and reference all the time because they have that emotionality and they connect to you on that level. And this is a movie that I think does that as well, maybe even better than those in some ways.
I agree. I feel like there's moments we're watching this movie where I feel like a kid watching this movie, this is going to be some kind of watershed moment for them in their life. Like, a thing that they never forget, that they remember, that they carry forward into them, that helps fuel their love for movies and other kinds of stories and other kinds of these type of experiences. Absolutely. I have a question for you though. And again, I'm trying not to be specific here, but I don't know anyone in this movie's name at all. I don't know any of Jake Sully's kids. Well, that's okay. I just lied. I know Jake Sully's name. I know Natir. I know the characters' names from the previous movie. None of the new characters. I don't know any of their names. And part of that is my stupid Americanism where the name is different sounding and therefore it just goes right out in my head. But part of that is just, I don't know. The thing I'm curious about here is that problem because, like, I don't know what Jake's eldest son. I don't remember what his name is. I don't remember what his name is at all, but I know who that is. I know who that is very clearly. His middle son, I know who that is. His youngest daughter, I know who that is. The Water Tribe people, I know exactly who these characters are and what they're about and what they stand for and what they mean. But is it say something maybe to this age old conversation about the Avatar universe, how it just doesn't stick in people's brains or the cultural consciousness, that you couldn't pay me money to reproduce their names from memory right now? Do you think there's something to that? I don't know. It's just, I found it really interesting that I just like, what was the name of Kate Winslet's character? I don't know.
I fully acknowledge that I'm probably only saying this because I love the movie, but I don't think that matters really. I don't think it matters that you can't remember the names. In fact, I think that it might have been to the movie's detriment if the movie decided, script wise, like, you're gonna damn well remember these characters' names, and just said them 10 times more, because then it would just be like, oh my god, please, I don't. It doesn't matter because it really doesn't matter. I mean, I think on the Aliens podcast episode, I at some point I was like, yeah, and then Vasquez's friend, and you were like, Frost. I was like, yeah, whatever, because like the point is, a lot, like, all those Marines in that movie are super well characterized, but I don't necessarily remember their names, and I've seen that movie 100 times, and the thing is, I don't care.
And definitely the only reason I do remember their names is because I've seen the movie 100 times. Like, it's very possible that 20 years from now, when I'm on my 600th viewing of Avatar: The Way of Water, I will be like, ah, yes, Loak. Yeah. I know him. But right now, no, I don't.
I don't even remember the names of the characters that were in the first movie in many cases, and I don't consider that to be a problem. And I never, you and I, as we're talking about it, we're going to say the older son, the younger daughter, and that's total. We're going to know exactly what we're talking about, and it's fine.
There was a moment where we saw scenes of Marines that worked under Stephen Lang's character in the original movie, and I was like, am I supposed to know who that guy is? And I think it is a testament to the movie that ultimately that doesn't matter, because regardless of what single word you attach to them, there is an emotional core and emotional beat at who they are and what they represent and all these things, and we'll get into it. Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting. Like, the whale creatures, I don't remember what the names of those were. They had a really distinct name. They're incredibly important to what the film is, but I can't remember
whales.
It's whales. Yeah, it's a big whale. So yeah, I mean, I just thought that was interesting, and I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is kind of interesting. I think I'm trying to decide how I feel about how important names are, because I guess this movie almost, showed me not very, like, they must not be very important.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a much larger question. Like, how much, I feel like when you and I talk about movies a lot, we so often revert to just calling the character by the actor's name, like a lot. Yeah. And is that because names don't stick well with us particularly, or is it like what's in a name, I guess, is the question. Like, some of my favorite things of all time, I remember the names of the characters very clearly, and is that a result of me being obsessed with it? I don't know. This is maybe a conversation for a different day, but it just really struck me that I was listening to people talk about this movie on podcasts, and if they would say the name of the character, I would have to be like, wait, which one?
Yeah.
But if they talked about them by their characteristics, you know it immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just something that I don't tend to pay much attention to in a movie, and movies tend to be written in a way where it doesn't matter that much. And if it is going to matter a lot, like if you're watching Pride and Prejudice, and like most of the movie is people talking about other characters, then you're going to remember the names.
Sure.
But if the movie is Indiana Jones, you're going to remember one character's name, that's Indiana Jones. And everybody else, there's bad guy, and there's his buddy, and there's his other buddy, and then there's like henchman number 3, and that's like, you don't actually need to know the names.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if this movie was named like Natiri, The Way of Water, I'd probably remember her name.
Yeah, fair enough.
We've spent too much time on this. let's go
Yeah.
ahead and transition smoothly into our all spoilers discussion, because I really have so many. I'll say this at the beginning: a surprising number of things I really want to get in detail with you on the story of this film.
Yeah, absolutely. Begin, Scott.
So I guess the one thing I wanted to talk about at the beginning, I think a great way to structure this conversation is to talk about the structure, because one of the big complaints I heard about this movie is that it's basically, in essence, broadly structurally similar to the first one,
Mhm.
in the broad strokes of the film. And I think that's an accurate statement. I think it is generally, our character goes to a brand new place. In the first movie, it was Pandora itself. In this, he goes from being part of the forest tribe to going to this water of tribe, and then having to relearn all their customs and relearn and kind of rediscover the beauty of Pandora through the eyes of people that have never been to this part of it. And then we do our final confrontation. The final confrontation is in fact with the same character from the first movie. Stephen Lang is back. They've put him in an avatar body, and we have lots to talk about at that. But I guess generally, because that was one of the complaints, someone compared it to Star Wars The Force Awakens, actually, and that it's just kind of inevitably referential to the first movie. And I'm curious what your thoughts on that are.
It's a sequel.
Yeah, but it is. I mean,
okay.
do you agree that like the broad structure of the movie is very similar to the first one?
Yeah. But I think that Cameron is writing a saga, which is basically, this is not even, super heavily obscured. He's writing the saga of a people who are being invaded and who are on their way to extermination, and the loss of everything that they value and all of the beauty of their world and their culture. And they have one dude who's from the invading culture saying, y'all don't realize how bad this is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the first movie was him coming to love the native culture. And the second movie is him trying, basically sort of giving up on the idea that he's going to be able to defeat the invading culture and trying to flee deeper into the culture that he loves. And the subsequent movies are going to be him leading them in
Yeah.
some kind of epic war. So I think it's pretty clear that James Cameron views this as that is the story that he's telling. So like, this was never going to be like some just oddball, just different science fiction story. It's the Avatar story is this story. It is the story of the invading, destructive culture, and the Na'vi culture,
and what I love about it actually is, of course, the choice to bring Stephen Lang back, which was something like, honestly, Matt, here's kind of how the movie went for me. The first 30 minutes or so, there was definitely a feeling of, uh-oh, in the back of my head. I was a little worried. It's a little slow to start. Like I kind of instinctively rolled my eyes at Stephen Lang's, the way they brought Stephen Lang back is he's now they copied his memories from right before he died, and now he's in an avatar body, and so now like he's in the body of the thing he hates, and like I saw exactly where this was going, and I kind of rolled my eyes at it. And then from here, the movie zags in a really interesting way. I mean, obviously, when our main character and his family get to the water kingdom, whatever, that's when the movie really starts to like sing, and that's when I really, really fell in love with it. But what they do with the Quaritch character, Stephen Lang's character, is fascinating, and it's not anything that I expected in this movie. This movie, I think we talked in our review last year that characters like Sam Worthington's Jake and like Stephen Lang's Quaritch are really just supposed to be archetypes that are just like, this is this big epic mythologic storytelling, and they're really just supposed to be archetypes. We don't really explore anything that deep with them. They're pretty simple. Stephen Lang is clearly just the bad guy. He's just supposed to be the stand-in bad guy. He's the thing we can focus our hate and ire towards, a representative of everything we hate about humanity, and that's all we need him to be. And it worked. It was functional in that movie. And then in this movie they go, okay, but actually we're going to do something really interesting with this. Because his arc through this movie is basically Jake's arc through the first movie. I mean, not thematic arc, but like literal storytelling arc, right? He
Mhm.
is kind of doing a fast forwarded version of everything Jake went through in the first movie. And of course, he's a different person, so his reactions to it are very different. And we're talking about fathers and sons. That's a lot of this movie is family, what it means to be family, what it means to be a father, what it means to try to protect your family. And they're dealing with that with the spider character who we have to get into. But I just, what was your reaction to the Stephen Lang character?
Very similar to yours. I'll go so far as to say that I thought he was my least favorite part of the first movie. He felt one dimensional to me.
Mm-hmm.
He felt like a caricature of a Marine
Yeah.
in a way that Cameron usually doesn't. He usually doesn't strike that false note. Like he does play in archetypes, but his archetypes are usually a little bit more three dimensional. And
Yeah.
that character was just like, oh, yep, he's exactly that with no nuance. And then he, you know, and then he does this really, I mean, I thought honestly fascinating, like science fiction fun choice of saying, yeah, we you know, first of all, you're so not a person to this machine of you know, the human government, that we have just copied your brain, and
Yeah.
we're going to reuse you as a weapon even though you died. Your death is no escape for you. You go back into the war now because
Yeah.
we own you, body and soul,
Mm-hmm.
which is extremely disturbing and awesome, actually.
Yeah.
And then he had, you know, I felt like the performance was better, which is just parenthetically, one thing I want to say about this movie is that I thought all the performances were better across the board. Like I've never thought that Sam Worthington was the best actor in the world, to put it mildly, but
Yeah.
I thought he was great in this. I thought he really nails a lot of the conflict and anxiety and suffering that the Jake Sully character is going through. And I'm like, did he get better at acting? Maybe. Did the CGI get better and thus allow the emotions to come through more? Something along these lines, maybe. So anyway, to rewind back to the Stephen Lang's character, yeah, like it's so much more complex. Everything involving his son, obviously, once
Mm-hmm.
his son comes onto the scene, it becomes incredibly interesting. The sort of slow seduction, and you know, by the end of the movie, it's clear that he's highly conflicted about what he's doing, and he
Yeah.
empathizes with Jake Sully, but he's not like Jake Sully, so he's not going to compromise. But it's like I'm like haunted by when Spider saves his life and drags him out of the water, and then Spider jumps back in the water, and Stephen Lang's character like cries his name after him in this like heartbreakingly choked voice.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it was
not just his name, but calls him Spider, the name
Yeah.
that like he was kind of that he had adopted
Yeah.
as a kind of you know, what's the word, a Tarzan basically of Pandora. That's the name, the kind of adopted name. And I don't think Stephen Lang's character called him that at all throughout the movie. I
Yeah.
think he used his real name at first, and then mostly just called him boy or kid. So that was I think you're absolutely right, a big moment, and Lang's performance nails that. It's great. It's great that the ending of this movie posits this moment where, you know, he's got Jake's daughter, and then Natiri comes out of nowhere and has got his son at knife point. And you're like, what's going to happen here? Who's going to budge? And the person you never think would budge is the one that ultimately does it, which is Stephen Lang. Like, because his character throughout this whole thing, there's this wonderful conflict like built into his character, this idea that I have this man's memories, but I am not him. I am not your father. That man's dead. I love the alas poor Yorick moment where he picks up his own skull and looks at it and is like, alas poor Yorick, I am him. Well, and then of course crushes the skull as this wonderful attempt to show he's moving on from that person and that way of life. It's a great moment, and everything builds to how it ends, right? And
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
obviously this is being set up for future conflict. I'm kind of like, my initial reaction, this is what this movie did to me, is that a lot of my initial reactions to moments was to roll my eyes, and then the movie would you know, earn it after that moment, and I would feel bad for rolling my eyes, because I rolled my eyes at the idea that Stephen Lang's character was going to somehow survive. Like, I was like, oh, come on. No way. No way. But then I was so glad that he did. I was so glad,
Mhm.
because there's so much more to do there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I right? Because I actively didn't think this was a good character from the first movie,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh my god, like I'm actually going to like Avatar 1 more now, because I'm gonna think about, like, oh, isn't it interesting how they took this guy who was this boring one-dimensional character, and then now there's this layer of, like, but I know where he goes, and I know
Yeah.
what challenges are put in front of him, and
Yeah.
um it's such a delightful, clever idea to say, yeah, this guy who is, I mean, basically like the worst kind of racist, speciesist.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're a Navi, and you're not just a Navi, jacking into an avatar body. That's your body now.
Mm-hmm.
That's your only body. That's, and then and then of course he has to do the writing the beast scene and all that other stuff, and he,
Yeah.
like, kind of starts to go native, and, like, I actually like how his like attire begins to change over the course of the movie, as he kind of
Yeah.
becomes more like, bush attire.
Yeah. They, like, at the beginning of the movie, all the Team Blue
Mhm.
Marines that are the reincarnated Marines in Avatar bodies are all decked out in standard Marine issue camo, and by the end of it, that's definitely changed.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, his character is one of the things I'm most looking forward to in the third movie, because I don't know where it's going to go. I think it's going to be this really interesting idea of, like, there's going to be multiple levels and angles of conflict coming into the finale, because I don't think he's just going to, like, go back and join up with the company again and just be a company man, because I guess I'm not sure. Actually, this is I have a question about the plot of this film, actually,
Mhm.
because I think it's relatively simple, and then there are moments when you're like, what? So one of the things that I've heard a lot complaint wise is it doesn't make sense why these people are going after Jake Sully so vehemently. It
Mhm.
makes sense for Stephen Lang as a revenge plot, but the army and the company, like, once he's kind of stepped down from his role as president of the resistance or whatever, why are they pursuing him so much? And so I guess the question I have for you is, when he goes and, like, gets the whaling ship and says, you're doing this for me now, is that, like, on the authority of his employers, or is he just kind of, he and his group just kind of going rogue and saying, we're doing this now? I'm not, it's not clear to me.
So I really do just fall back on the idea that this is a story about the American West, actually, um, which clears up a lot of stuff, really.
Sure.
Like, for example, I think a thought that you and I both had was, it's kind of weird that these, like, whaling boat functionaries are willing to, like, shoot at children. Um, but in the Old West, I don't think that would have been weird, actually. I think that everybody was horrible, and they were more than willing to shoot at Native American children because they didn't see them as human.
Yeah,
They,
sure. When you
they were,
otherize someone to that extent, it becomes a lot easier to, yeah.
and they don't see the Navi as human. They don't see the
Mhm.
Navi as people. They see the Navi as, like, these animals, and they've probably been trained and propagandized enough that, you're getting in the way of my paycheck, basically,
Mhm.
and it's very easy to not see them as people anymore. That's just okay. So then your actual question was, like, the mechanics of the plot. Basically, it's just gesturing, I think, at how inhumanly monstrous the human culture or government or company, we can just call it the company, right? It's James Cameron, so we'll just call it the company, because it doesn't really have a name, does it?
Mhm.
The
I think it does. It's like the resource something or other.
is it the East India Company or something? Yeah.
I don't think it's clear. I don't
Yeah.
think it's exactly that, but it's like the Interplanetary Resource Commission. It's something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So to want to get around to actually answering your question, I think my answer would be that entity is smart enough to know that a human mind that is set against the human invasion is maybe the only thing that's actually dangerous to the human invasion, and that's worth snuffing out regardless.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
I think that's fair.
and also like commandeering one whaling boat to go after him, I just is probably just not that big of an allocation of their resources at this point, because it seems like they've just got so, we saw like it was like a dozen of those ships landing. Just
Yeah.
probably huge amount of human presence on the planet now.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the things we learn is that unobtainium is like so last century, right? We don't care about that anymore. The
Uh-huh.
the big good juice this time around is Fountain of Youth whale brain.
Yeah.
So there's this liquid inside the brains of these whales that apparently just makes people live forever, which is like is a delightful thing to just drop in your movie and
Yeah.
then just kind of move on from.
I
It's
agree.
just like, oh yeah, like literally eternal youth serum right here. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, no, I agree that I love that. It's the kind
Mhm.
of thing where I see people complaining about this, just like they complained about unobtainium, and I'm like,
Mhm.
why is there no joy in your life? Just accept that this is the thing. Like they need a reason to go after the whales.
Uh-huh.
It's a science fiction movie,
Yeah.
so just let it happen. Just
Yeah, this is the Save the Whales movie. So
yeah,
we're going to say the whales have some incredibly important thing that
right.
means they're hunted. Done. Like we don't it doesn't need to be more than that. It really doesn't. Like I don't
No,
like I saw complaints that were like we learn in this movie that the earth is dying and that actually Pandora is being set up not only as a place to mine for resources but a second home for humanity, but we don't get to see any of that from the human side. And I'm like, what fucking movie are you? This is not about the humans. This is
yeah.
not what this movie's
The,
about.
the humans are the villains. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to break it to you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the thing we kind of gesture towards in the non-spoiler section is the second act of the film, which is most of the second hour of the movie, which is when um, Jake takes his family to the Water Kingdom to hide out because he's being hunted by Stephen Lang and his people. Which I've seen people complain about this as well. How stupid of a plan this was. That like, oh, you don't want to put your own people in danger, but I'll put these people in danger. And I actually agree, and I think that's the point. I think like
Yeah,
Jake Sully is a very like tactically intelligent person. Like he knows tactics and he knows how to lead. But like at decision making in the first movie, Jake Sully was kind of a dum dum, and he's still kind of a dum dum in this movie. Like so, I think they're right that that was a dumb plan. It was a bad plan, Jake, but. It was a character like it was an aligned character plan. It makes sense to me that Jake Sully
yeah.
would make this plan.
Well, he's motivated by fear,
Yeah, yeah.
and not cleverness. Like he has
Mhm.
no. I think maybe not in exactly the context we were talking about here, but like there's a moment when he says to Neytiri, like I don't have a plan,
Yeah.
which is him basically admitting like the force that we're up against is vastly beyond what I, as a resourceful dude with a bow and arrow and capable of grappling with, all I can think to do is run. And since we
Mhm.
can't literally run forever, we have to hide. So we're going to run and hide over here, far away from them, and honestly, maybe just hope that they don't come after us.
Yeah, yeah.
Which maybe was a it's funny you just told me people were complaining that they spent all these resources coming after them, and other people are complaining that he thought that this would work. It's like these are literally opposite complaints. Like
That's true. That's
because it
true.
could have worked. They might have just said, yeah, forget him, who cares, and he could have
Yeah.
gotten away.
Mhm. Yeah, but ultimately it was a futile thing because yeah, you can't run. I mean, this is one of the interesting messages of this movie, right? I think this is a movie which Jake again and again and again chooses not to fight, is trying to prevent the war, is trying to
Mhm.
stop violence. And like at first, this is seen as kind of a good thing. Like you have the whales. We learn that the whales are complete pacifists. By the way, we are told explicitly that not only are they smarter than us, but they're just like better at emotions than us too.
Uh-huh.
They're just like better than us in every way, and it makes the killing of them even more awful. And so like we're kind of told that they are complete pacifists and they won't fight at all. They won't, like, even as we see as they're being killed, as they're being separated and murdered for their resources, they don't put up any fight. And the ship captain kind of like jokingly says, yeah, they've never fought. So this is actually a movie that is like, actually pacifism is bad. Or there certainly are certain circumstances when there's a fight, there's a war that's happening, and you cannot run from it and you cannot stop it, and you have to fight if you want to try to save and protect the people that you love and the people that are important to you and the things that are important to you. You must fight. You must do that.
Yeah, no, I thought that was well done, because the context of them being pacifists is, we, the whales, can't afford to have violence in our world, and so we're going to have this very strict code of pacifism within our world as the whale people. And then a totalitarian exterminating force comes out of space. You can't afford to have that policy anymore, right? And it just makes sense. I mean, I know we'll probably get to it eventually, but I just want to say at this point that, like, I think maybe everybody's favorite part of the movie is when our best friend whale finally opens up a cannibal pass on the whaling ship.
It's so good.
It's
so
incredibly
good.
satisfying. It's just yes.
The entire last hour of the movie, Matt, the entire it is one long action sequence that draws on every single great James Cameron thing ever. I mean, it's got sinking ship Titanic stuff in there that's beautiful and emotional and resonant. It's got Terminator-esque chase sequences in there that's just wonderfully done. It's got like just kick-ass aliens action sequences. It's got the best parts from Avatar as well, where you're seeing how the way the animals are kind of employed to whip ass. It's all of it. It's all of it amalgamated into this just incredible action sequence. And the thing that I loved about it, and the thing that this movie affected me very emotionally. I mean, the death of the son, since we're in spoilers, we can say that now. The death of the son, I wept. I was not expecting that. That it was very, very easy to put my son's head on this blue body and like get very exactly into the mind of the character, how he must be feeling in that moment. But like the whole action sequence was kick ass and wonderful, and it made me kind of sad too. It just like it made me sad that like this is necessary. And I'm not saying it wasn't necessary, but just this idea that like this is what it's come to, and look at all this death and awfulness, and like the realization that I was experiencing the realization that Jake had as he was having it, which is that there is no running from this. There is no hiding from this. This is here and it's not going to go away. And the only thing you can do is fight. And that doesn't mean the fighting can't be badass and cool, but it's also tragic in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think this is necessarily true in the first movie, but this movie made me feel sad every time one of the like plesiosaurs got shot, or and even a bit of sort of, I don't know, something, a pang of something when they would just kill some, irrelevant human worker on the ship, where you're like normally you feel either absolutely nothing or mildly satisfied. And I think I was like, oh, this is horrible. I think I felt satisfied when the whale got revenge on the whaling captain, because fuck
ripping
that
his
guy.
arm off was pretty fucking satisfactory.
It was good, yeah. I think my kids were a little disturbed by that, and they were also kind of disturbed by, like, I think just the fact that the son died. Like that was really heavy for them. I mean, it's interesting because normally I think nothing of showing them a PG-13 movie, because PG-13 is, a certain level of violence, right? But it's not the violence; it's the horrible emotional weight of the watching the family just wail over their brother and their son bleeding out in front of them. I was actually like, oh, I maybe I wouldn't have taken them to see this if I knew about this, but on the other hand, like I I felt more complicated about that moment than I felt about
Yeah.
almost anything that I've shown them, because even
I mean,
something horrifying in like a spectacle sense you can get over, but like that's just like, oh, that's painful.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I and again, I don't have kids old enough to take them, so I didn't experience what you're experiencing, but I do think it's important to experience that. Like, I was actually as horrible and tragic as it was, and I cried so much when the movie killed the son. I actually kind of respected the movie for killing the son. Like,
Hmm.
I to commit to that loss and that pain that all our characters get to experience was, I don't know, I appreciated that the movie was willing to go there, and it really is tragic. I mean, like, the line, I like where this eldest kid who was always like the good one, right? Like, he's
Hmm.
in the dynamic between the two sons, he's like the straight and narrow, always follows orders one, and like the tough one. And he, like, in that moment where he just says, I just want to go home, like
Yeah.
that broke me. That
Yeah.
broke me. And
Yeah.
I just, like, I went into this movie expecting to feel awe, expecting to be like, how did you do this, James Cameron? How did you do this? And I felt all that. What I was not expecting was to have a movie like really hit me at the core of where I live as a father, and like, and I think the movie accomplishes this. So I of course have not felt the fears that the Jake Sully character feels towards his family, and the complicated nature of, watching your kids grow up, and also having to watch them grow up in a world where they kind of have to be warriors by default, and the tragedy that's inherent to that, and also the anxiety, but just like a general level of anxiety you have for your children, and you want to protect them. Like, the line that's repeated, I think, several times is like uh, protecting my children is what gives me purpose. It's what gives me
Yeah.
meaning. Like, being that person that can keep them from harm. That's what, and like the inability to do that, the acknowledgement that this is a world we live in where you can't always do that. I just found it. Oh my God. Oh
Yeah.
my God. And then the moment where he goes into the life tree and sees his baby son fishing,
Hmm.
like, how are you not touched by that moment? How are you not, I don't know. I don't know. I found the father son stuff so incredibly
Yeah.
effective in this
Yeah.
thing.
That, and I mean, embedded in all of that was another moment that just gutted me when he, Jake is already absolutely just like deflated and just wrung out by the watching his son die, and now he knows he has to go back into the boat to get his daughters,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no like fun action implication to any of this. It's like, this sucks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. You're like, I don't want this to continue. I want this to be over now.
Yeah.
But we have to. He has to go back into the boat, and his son, his younger son, with whom he's had all of this tension the whole movie, is like, well, I want to come help, Dad, and Jake, like, again, just the acting on display. He looks at his son and he goes, I think you've done enough. And it's just like, oh my God, like just because like, there's like a part of him that's like, I shouldn't say this to him,
Yeah.
but he's so like angry and
Yeah.
hurt that he says this thing to his son that, like, he knows he shouldn't say it, but he says it, and like, just the performance, just like everything about that, I
Yeah.
was like, oh
It,
my
it's
God.
it's the exact wrong thing to say in the moment.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
incredibly cruel, hurtful thing to say to your
Yeah.
son who is hurting just as much as you are at the loss of his brother, and yet it is so true to the character that, like, he messed up. He's
Hmm.
distraught and destroyed, and he makes another mistake. And again, the willingness to do this, the willingness to see and paint these characters as imperfect, is lovely to me. I think the same thing goes with Zoe Saldana, which I do think this movie kind of gives her a short shrift. There's just not enough. There's just not a lot of room for her in this film. There's just not, and I think
Hmm.
that's a kind of a bummer, because I think she's remarkable, and I think she's, in the moments she does get in this movie, absolutely incredible. And one of those moments is when, you know, Jake has to go to her, and she's in this wail of grief, and has to say, we have to go get our daughters, come on. And she just, like, stands up and just, like, becomes the warrior. and
Hmm.
and again, the action is cool, I guess, but it's also just brutal and violent. And I actually love when Spider is hiding from her because she's so terrifying and
Yeah.
like monstrous in that moment. And it's already been established earlier in the movie that like while Jake and the rest of his family kind of has welcomed this kid, this kind of feral kid into their lives, she sees him as distinctly different. And that's what leads perfectly to the moment where she grabs him and threatens to murder him. And the establishment here, that everything that James Cameron does to build up to this moment really makes you believe that she is not only capable of doing it, but might just actually do it.
Totally.
And it all works. It all works so well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of great stuff with her. It's just not, the dramatic focus of the movie. Like I love all of the stuff involving like this massive tension between her and who I'm now realizing is Kate Winslet.
Yes.
Just really good performances and like relatively sort of subtle and functional kind of background storytelling and these great things happening in the background there.
Yeah, I couldn't help but feel bad for Kate Winslet, who apparently had to do the same training that everyone else did, where they had to just learn how to dive and like lengthy hold your breath underwater stuff. Like I think the record was Kate Winslet was better than any of the actors or actresses and held her breath for 7 minutes. And I'm watching this movie going, okay, when did that part happen? At what point did she need to hold her breath underwater for a long time? Because she's just barely in this movie.
Yeah, maybe she's more in the next one. I don't know.
Maybe that's very possible.
Because didn't they film them at the same time?
They did. Yes.
That's the only answer I have is maybe she's more. Because you can even imagine a fun evolution of her character where she was extremely standoffish at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then they came to accept them by the end, right? So
yeah.
And it's Kate Winslet, so he's gonna put her to good use, right?
Sure. Yeah, and the God, there's so many things to talk about, Matt. The brother relationship, I think, between the older brother and the younger brother is just really good too. This idea, again, we're playing in kind of broad archetypes here. You have the perfect older brother and the troublemaking younger brother, and how those ideas butt heads against each other, and then within this new place they are, and the younger brother's attraction to the outcast whale. It all functions. It's like, again, I don't think this movie does anything like particularly new overall. Like it's not like telling stories that have never been told before. That is not what Cameron does. That is not really how Cameron operates. But I think what he does is operate within his lane very, very well. And I think this is a very functional story. And I mean that in the nicest way I could possibly mean it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the young boy and the magical space whale, it almost feels like a Disney, like a classic Disney animated story.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. And I mean that in like the best possible way, because it's like perfectly streamlined, archetypal, like this is the story. The whale is an outcast. The kid feels kind of like an outcast. They become friends. He bonds with the whale against orders, and it causes a problem. But then he's going to be loyal to the whale, even though it gets him in trouble. And then the whale,
it's Free Willy, right? It's basically just Free Willy.
it's kind of like Free Willy, I guess. And then the whale jumps up on the ship, and then the whale opens his mouth and is like, "Hey, I'm a stupid whale. Shoot me in the mouth." And the guy shoots the rocket, and the whale immediately ducks his head down and deflects the missile off the top of his head onto a different ship because he's a genius super whale and not a dumb whale. And it's awesome. Just had to get that out there.
And yeah, I mean, the fact that the kid is able to teach his father something, and his father is able to teach his sons, like it all works very well. The one character we haven't touched on too much so far is Sigourney Weaver's character, who plays their adopted daughter, Kiri, who we learn in the movie was born of the avatar of Sigourney Weaver from the first movie. Remember, she was shot in that movie, and they were trying to transfer her consciousness to her avatar body like they did with Jake, and it didn't work. She died during the transfer, we're told. But not apparently before a baby was put in. It's not explained what happened here, but she's basically Navi Jesus, I think.
I mean, yeah, I have no no problem with any of this, because my
No.
assumption is that either this was something that she did to herself because she was a AWA researcher, or this is something that AWA did to her body
Yeah.
when she was in the mind meld or whatever.
I mean, we're kind of told explicitly that like the souls that return to Awa like still exist there on
Mhm.
some level, both by the fact that Kiri like interacts with Awa and then sees Sigourney Weaver talking to her, and also we see Jake and Natiri, see their son. So like the souls return to the planet and they're still there in some way. So I don't know. This is the one thing of the film that feels like just setting up stuff for the conclusion of whatever arc is going to happen here.
Yeah, definitely that, because she's shown to have magical AWA powers that
Hmm.
no other character has, and like the other Navi are like, what the hell did you just do?
Yeah.
So that's definitely, I like is it I don't know, is it a flaw to say that, like, I'm pretty sure I know like exactly where this goes, like it's like it does
I don't think it's a flaw.
I
No.
that doesn't make me like it any less. It's like, yeah, it's the story that it is. Every
Hmm.
story is some kind of archetype.
Yeah.
Um,
I think we need to stop generally saying like that perhaps being ahead of a story means it's not a very good story. Like I was talking about this with someone about the show White Lotus that I talked to
mhm,
you about last week, and how like the internet sleuths basically like spent the weeks between episodes predicting every plot movement, and they were
mhm.
largely just right about half of them, and like deciding that means it's a inferior story because it's predictable, I guess. I just don't think that matters. Like,
No, well, have you heard of what happened with Westworld, where allegedly, okay, I'm kind of going off of what people say, but allegedly, like, the showrunners of Westworld would go on the subreddits and read what people were saying about their theory crafting for what was
mhm,
going on, what was going to happen, and then they would change the story so that didn't happen.
that sounds awful.
And it was awful. I never watched Westworld, but my understanding is that the show just completely goes off the rails and becomes chaos, which is what you would expect to happen when story setups are intentionally subverted, and not subverted in the fun way, but subverted in the just like, aha, you
Yeah,
didn't know this was going to happen, and you're just like, oh, okay. But
yeah,
like you're just not supposed to watch stories that way, where you're just
uh-huh,
always leading the ball. And in any case, I would argue that, like, the actual meat and potatoes of the story is the emotionality and like feeling heartbreak when the son dies,
yeah,
not like knowing like okay, the first one of the first things that happens in the movie is one of the sons, I don't actually remember which one, honestly, but one of the sons gets like knocked down and injured by an explosion.
mhm,
um and it's like, okay, well, this is foreshadowing that one of the sons is going to die. um but if you let that ruin the movie for you, then you're not watching the movie correctly. I don't know why I'm getting hung up on this. It's just like I see a lot of bad faith and sort of, I don't know, weirdly like cynical refusal to let things affect people emotionally, and I'm just like, just don't do that.
yeah. I mean, I think we spent a lot of this review talking about people's reaction to this movie and kind of brushing it off, and I don't want to, make it seem like the movie needs defending in that way. I don't really care what other people think of it, but I do think it is very strange the amount of cynicism that has been approached to this movie. The
Hmm.
amount of like I'm not saying you have to like it. I don't understand why you wouldn't, but I'm not saying you have to. But like the idea that like we're so ready to tear this thing down. It's like we've been waiting 13 years to just rip this fucking thing apart. It's like I didn't like the first one. It was stupid and everyone made it into a big deal, and so this one's out and I'm going to show you how fucking stupid this whole thing is. And I don't understand that. I don't get it. And
Yeah.
again, I don't think the movie's perfect. I think the movie has some flaws. We've talked about some of them already, but I just it's really weird the way people handle this franchise. I don't understand it.
Yeah. um I mean, I think I agree with what you said a second ago, which is I, I should just not care.
Yeah.
I think what offends me isn't like people don't like a thing that I like. It's
Mhm.
actually just like, why are you keeping yourself from experiencing joy?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's it. It's like you're for no reason you have decreased the amount of joy that is possible in the world,
Mhm.
and I'm
And there's
just
so
like,
much joy to be had in this movie.
yeah,
Like the entire second act, man. Just like we just go swimming with the fishes. We just go full James Cameron documentary mode, just swimming with the fishes, except instead of the real world, it's a world he's entirely created. And it's beautiful and it's
mhm,
inspiring. And it's like watching them learn how to ride these animals and experiencing the water and it's like I don't know how they did it. I I don't know how this movie did this. I don't know
mhm,
how this movie never made me at once think, "Oh, these are CGI characters just floating around in CGI," and
yeah.
that's all it is. It
Well,
always felt tangible and tactile and mysterious and beautiful, and
yeah.
it all works, all of it.
Yeah, well, there's stuff that somebody pointed out that I didn't even think about until they pointed this out, which is kind of remarkable. Which is basically, you can be watching, a fully CGI scene, and you're thinking like, yeah, okay, well, I mean, it's all in the computer, so ultimately, nothing surprises me because it's all in the computer,
Mhm.
except Spider's there,
Mhm.
which means they like vastly more complex of a scene to actually film because now you
Yeah.
have you definitely had motion cap involving all of the Avatar people in the scene because, like,
Underwater motion cap. Let's just like James Cameron
yeah,
invented underwater motion capture.
yeah, yeah. So
Like
it's just the integration of real and CGI elements and motion
mhm.
capture um and then there's just like setting all of that aside, like just as an action movie, it's absolutely bitchin'.
Mhm.
Um, it's just so well done. Uh, I don't know. I don't know how your brain works, but for me, I sort of kept seeing the movie in my head for like the next day after watching it. So let me give you a comparison point. I watched Black Adam because it was on HBO Max for free, and because I was just like feeling really low energy.
Uh-huh.
Um, and as soon as I stopped watching that movie, I didn't think about it for a nanosecond beyond that. I didn't think about the visuals. I didn't think about the story. I just went on. But Avatar was like involuntarily living in my brain, and like images would like flash through and like sequences would like replay themselves in my head. And I think it's just like the way Cameron films things is so perfect and
Mhm.
arresting and thought through and careful that almost any 3-second clip in this movie you could just like study all of the details of it and
Yeah.
appreciate why it was done that way. And that action, it's basically like an hour long action scene to which this also applies. So
Yeah.
I was like involuntarily replaying the movie in my head. um
I do not function that way, but I agree with you about the action. Cameron is a master, and he's a master. Like it's all clear. You can follow it the entire time. He doesn't go like Michael Bay, sometimes, or he just does this nonstop quick cutting stuff where you can't see anything. It has energy. It's kinetic. It moves and it's clear and like you see the ebbs and flow. This is something that I think we talked about in the original Avatar. They did so well is you can kind of track the victories and defeats of the battle as they go through it, and I think the same happens here. And then it escalates, it keeps building and building and building to the point where we have Zoe Saldana like crawling through a ship that is sinking and spinning, and I don't know how they did that. Like, did you just build a ship set and put it on a gimbal and like fill it with water and then have like, because surely a lot of it is CGI, but not all of it. Like, I just I don't know how they did it, and
yeah,
it works so well.
this is one of the ones where I simultaneously want to watch the special features and don't want to watch them, because
Uh-huh.
if I watch them, then I'll be thinking about that every time I watch the movie.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
I mean, one of the interesting things that I think is that the whale hunting scene. This is really interesting to me because this is, I think, at the core of who James Cameron is as a filmmaker. Is he's this guy who is a tech dork who loves technology, who loves the power of machines and all these cool things, and loves using them and also filming them. But he's also an environmentalist. He's a guy that he's a vegetarian. He doesn't eat meat. He cares about the environment. These things are all really important to him. And I love how these two things collide in these really interesting ways. Because he's a director that can't help but shoot the whale hunting sequences as if all this technology is actually kind of cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of cool the way it all works and the way he like takes the time to show us beat by beat, step by step, how these whalers do their job, how they do their day to day, how they catch the whale, how they manipulate the whale. And it's monstrously cruel, and the movie knows it's cruel. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's also James Cameron thinks it's kind of cool. And I love the push pull of that. I love the push pull of this idea that obviously hunting these beautiful, intelligent creatures is wrong. Absolutely wrong. But that the technology about it is kind of cool. I mean, that's Terminator, right?
Yeah.
That's Aliens. Like, that this tech is really fascinating, interesting, but bad. We shouldn't, but also isn't it cool? And that's the push and pull at the core of who he is as a person. And that's on display here. And I love it.
There's an allure to it, I think. So one I think really cool thing about it's throughout the movie, actually, now that I think about it. This is super thematic, actually. So I'm just like clicking into place for me that all of the robots in the movie are I don't know what the word is because my brain returned anamorphic, which I don't know if that's a word, but they look like animals. The every single robot. You've got spiders that are constructing the buildings in the beginning of the movie.
Crabs.
There's two different types of submarine. One of them is a crab. One of them is more like a dolphin. The giant whaling ship itself is sort of a flying fish / whale shark.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Even like the giant mecha suit that the general wears and walks around in, it's a human. It's a human form. And it's much more human looking than the heavy duty mechas we saw in the previous movie, actually.
Yeah. By the general, you of course mean Edie Falco, who astonishingly just shows up in this movie in full general for a couple scenes, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't expect to see her in this movie. Okay, sure. It was great. Loved it. Surprise Edie Falco. Never going to complain.
Well, yeah, and then there's also Jermaine Clement just there.
We got to talk about him though. But finish your thought. But I want to talk to you about Jermaine Clement.
Just the robots are all based on animals, and it's almost like sorry to quote the meme, but look what they have to do to mimic a fraction of our power. Where the humans, like, we're going to destroy nature and grind it up into a paste and extract all of the metal from the earth. And what are we going to do with it? We're going to turn it into robots in the same shapes as the things that we killed.
Yeah.
It's such a sign of the like nihilistic pointlessness of it all, right?
Yeah, especially compared to the symbiotic relationship that exists between the animals and the Na'vi, right? This idea that like they're not even just riding horses or riding fish. They're tying their tails to each other and interacting to each other on a fundamental, basic, natural level.
Yeah, mind melding.
Yeah. All right, Jermaine Clement. So a couple things. Surprise Jermaine Clement, never a bad thing. I don't understand. Mr. Cameron, why did you have him speak in an American accent in this movie? I don't get it. His American accent is not very good. He's a man from New Zealand. He should be allowed to speak in his New Zealand accent.
I don't have a good answer for you here. I mean, it's interesting because like I can't decide if like is he supposed to be a funny character, because he's actually supposed to be a heartbreakingly tragic character with a sense of irony about himself. And so the Jermaine Clementness of it all comes across when he's making these little wisecracks. But it's like, well, the wisecracks are actually from a place of self-hatred and deep conflict.
I mean, to be frank, I almost think he's arguably more despicable than the captain,
Mm-hmm.
in that at least the captain is being honest and upfront about his cruelty. Where I guess you don't earn any points from me, Jermaine Clement, by like sitting back and watching this thing happen and like clearly being disturbed by it but doing nothing.
Yeah.
I think actually I love that sequence where the way camera positions the scene is you have Spider in the foreground, like it's both of them in profile, and Spider's in the foreground, and Jermaine Clement's character's in the background, and they're both just like watching the monitor and watching the death of this whale. And Spider like keeps turning to look at Jermaine Clement like in horror, and like he doesn't look at him at all. He looks straight ahead. Like he doesn't even want to look into the eyes of this guy who is for the first time realizing the monstrosity of what they're doing here. He just won't do it. And Cameron holds on this scene for a very long time. He cuts back to it several times where Spider just like is continually shocked and horrified and like looking at Clement like, make me understand why this is happening. And he won't engage. He won't do it. And it's because he knows this is wrong and terrible, and yet he does it anyway. And I think this is a really interesting, Cameron commentary on the scientists that will participate in the thing, and hide behind their shield of, well, it's for the sake of science. Like you could argue that this is the exact thing that the scientists in the first movie were doing at the beginning, at least, that like they were going along with this horrible acts, because these people were funding their science with this long dream of it actually benefiting the Na'vi in some way, and it was all bullshit, and they were just kind of deluding themselves, and they eventually realized that and pushed back against it. But Jermaine Clement's character never does that.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I agree. I kind of wondered, it sure seems like he dies there at the end, but I was like, I did wonder if they were leaving it open to the idea that he survives and sort of joins the good guy team, because we do have this small cast of, renegade humans who are off somewhere else during most of the movie. But
it's, I mean, I will say in on IMDb, Dr. Ian Garvin shows up in the credits list for Avatar 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. Well.
So I don't know if that means yes, absolutely, or if that's just IMDb populating stuff.
I guess I'll say I wouldn't at all be surprised, because I felt like the way they shot, I was sort of intentionally paying attention to this. I don't know why exactly, but I was like, okay, the whaling captain's definitely going to die, but like the way that ship gets torn apart, clearly we see him get clear of it before it.
He gets kind of tossed, right?
He gets tossed, but not like tossed into a rock specifically. So yeah. Anyway, that minor point. It's very brutal movie though. There's a lot of
it is.
There's a lot of people being shot in the face with giant spear arrows.
Yeah, they're normal sized arrows for Na'vi, but for humans, just like giant fucking death spears. Yeah, it's rough. And it, it's so interesting because these are people, right? It's like the humans, the side we would normally ally with, are very clearly the enemy, and we do kind of celebrate the death and destruction of these people a little bit.
Yeah, in many cases we do. Yeah. I mean, we talked a bit about having complicated feelings about it, but like a lot of the Avatar, the resurrected Marines, they go out without much of a fight, really. Like they get shot in the face by Neytiri, who's just much better at this than they are, I guess.
Yeah.
And like what, yeah, I don't know. I had complicated feelings about each of those, because I was like, wow, it just seems like a tragedy to like, they literally brought you back to life and then you just die pointlessly again. I guess I'm supposed to feel that way, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's something straight out of Old Man's War. And I guess like the complaint that you could possibly make is that the movie doesn't really want to engage with that on anything deeper than just a very surface level. That like the movie's not really wanting to explore like the idea that, these guys are people that gave their lives in service to this job and then were, without their consent, resurrected to have to do it all again. Like that's in there, and I think certainly that's part of what we explore with the Quaritch character, but it's definitely not like a main focal point of the film.
Yeah. I I love when Giovanni Ribisi is briefly in the frame, and he's like, yeah, so we've got your memories and your personality, and he like holds it up and like waggles it around like he's holding like a
Yeah.
thumbstick, and then like clumsily puts it back in the case that it's in.
Yeah.
it's,
It's
it's
this is an entire person in here. I
yeah.
love that whole exposition sequence because it's just like it's like the perfect understanding of we need to get this information to the audience so they'll understand why Stephen Lang is back. But
Mhm,
like we know it's kind of boring and we want to do it. It's just a fun way of doing it is having him talk to himself and like berate himself while he's doing
mhm.
it.
I did like how human Stephen Lang in that sequence. He seems like the character from the first movie,
Hmm.
and then we have Navi Stephen Lang watching it, and it's there's like a sober perspective on his face as he's watching it, where he's like, "Well, look where that attitude got me," almost.
Yeah. And I mean, again, this could maybe be seen as a complaint of the movie that so much of what Stephen Lang is going through over the course of the movie is kind of buried under the surface of his marine bravado. But I kind of love it. I love that
Mhm,
like it's all in the subtext and you don't actually see it manifest itself physically until that great moment in the climax where you're like, "Oh, now I understand. I understand there's this whole thing was kind of boiling under him the entire time." Because
mhm,
there's an argument to be made of like, why are you keeping the spider kid around all the time? It
mhm,
seems like he single-handedly destroys this multi-million-dollar boat. It's like maybe we shouldn't have kept him around, but Stephen Lang can't help himself because he feels some real like attraction to this kid as
yeah,
his father, and he can't help it, and he's trying not to address it, he's trying not to deal with it, he's trying to distance himself from him, but he can't help it.
yeah,
And I really love this because I really when they first did it, I really thought they were going to do the thing where like the kid is kind of hypnotized into being won over to the side of the bad guys. You know,
mhm,
like he obviously has connection with his father. He cares about his father. He's trying to not admit it, but that's really not where the movie goes at all. Because like the second they get to the whaling ship and they just so upfront and terrible with the evil of it all
yeah,
that you're just like, oh, Spider knows exactly what his father is. There's not going to be any kind of like, oh, I was disillusioned by how fun it was to hang out with my dad, that this guy's actually good. No, no, he just
yeah.
set this village on fire and was totally going to shoot this woman in the head for not telling where Jake is. Spider's not going to be like won over to the side of the humans, actually. That's not what we're doing here. It's actually
It,
the opposite.
yeah. It's true, but it's not black and white either, because he still cares about his father enough that
Sure.
he first of all, he went along with some things that I think he only went along with them because it was his father, and then he does save his father in the
Hmm.
end, which is a decision that I mean is obviously going to have enormous ramifications in the future. Like,
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm sure just all kinds of ways. Jake is not going to be thrilled if he ever,
No, no.
when he finds out about this, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that's actually the thing that I'm most excited about the sequel is like, what does Stephen Lang's character do now?
Yeah.
Does he,
Definitely.
you know,
I think to your point, I think we kind of know we kind of know the grounds have been laid pretty explicitly for like what we're doing with Awa, and like when you look at the human presence on this planet, like there's no way they're gonna win this war unless they get some magical planet shit going on. So we can
mhm,
kind of see where that's going, especially around the Kiri character. But yeah, the big unknown for me is like how is Stephen Lang gonna fit into all this? What does that look like? What is that gonna be? What it's very exciting. It's very exciting to think about how that's going to work.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny that we started talking about his character and then we returned to talking about his character, and I think that's just because for all the fact that we said, this movie's kind of a retread of a lot of tropes. It's like, well, that seems really fresh and interesting and
Yeah.
dynamic, and I'm really not sure exactly how that's all going to fall out. And it's to me, it is a pretty original concept,
Yeah.
and also I think I'm just a sucker for like the idea of like a person who has died and is being given a second chance. I don't care if it's fantasy. I don't care if it's science fiction. I think that's
Hmm.
just a really cool notion that you don't see very
Yeah.
often.
Do you? Do you see this as a redemption arc for him? Like, where if you had to predict, where would you estimate he ends up?
Yeah, probably something in that space. Someone who even in this movie you can see him begin to see the brutality of what he's doing from the perspective of Spider, right? Like he perceives like, oh, I see what this looks like to the kid, and
Hmm.
and his reaction is not to sort of justify it; it's to sort of give pause, actually.
Sure.
And now I mean, I think you could say, well, maybe he just doubles down on it ultimately, which
Very
could very well
possible.
happen.
Yeah.
I think I just find that less interesting, but that could happen.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um,
Okay. Anything else you really wanted to talk about here?
gosh.
I'm sure there's thing like we've been going for like almost an hour and a half, and there's probably 20 more things we could. I, I want to say again, the movie is just absolutely stunningly beautiful. The village, the water people village, like just how seeing how the architecture is constructed, those bouncy walkways that the kids are bouncing on. It's all wonderful. The creatures, all the design, like I love the like flying alligator things that like they fly, but also when they're still in the water, like their tail is like going so like I love all of
Yeah,
that shit.
yeah, like a flying fish gar, basically.
Yeah.
You,
I love
you,
it. It's so
yeah.
cool. It's so cool and
Do,
fun.
do you remember like Avatar depression syndrome or whatever it was called back when the first movie came out?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was called, but it was like this idea that like there's some subset of people for whom living in in Pandora is so beautiful in contrast to their shitty lives that they become deeply depressed.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I remember this now. Yeah.
just like because of how beautiful it is, and like while I was watching this movie, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get Avatar depression, aren't I?" Because I'm sort of joking, but like it's such a beautiful, not just visually beautiful, but like compelling. The idea of living in this existence in harmony with the universe, and um it's just a beautiful idea.
Yeah, and Kate
And
Winslet's got her whale sister that they get to meet up every year and like catch up on it. Like, yeah,
yeah.
it's you're absolutely right. That affected me in this movie more than it did in the first one. I don't think I felt
Mhm.
that much in the first one. I mean, I liked that movie; it was very beautiful. Pandora was beautiful and fascinating, but this is like that to 11, kind
Yeah,
of.
sure. Well, yeah, I mean, like the flying lizard things aren't as much like people as the whale characters are.
Sure,
For
yeah.
one thing, that's just one dimension there.
Hmm.
um but yeah, there's just so much richness to it as a world, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess it's like people talk a lot about world building, and yeah, I think this is the final thing I'll say, I guess, is like I think world building is actually much harder than is commonly realized, and it
hmm,
actually consists of a million little careful, thoughtful choices, and not really so much the big ideas. I mean, the big ideas of your setting are obviously important. You have to get them right, and they have to be consistent with your theme and everything, totally. But the real world building is actually all of the grunt work of like deciding h- how the guys on the whaling ship operate the ship, and like what like how the turbines on the ship work, and
hmm.
how many crewmen you need, and how the little skiff that then shoots off to shoot the harpoons at the whale are going to work. All these tiny things that are like fractally spread throughout the entire movie.
Yeah,
Like to think about how much effort was put into understanding how the train that they derail at the beginning of the movie, how that works. It's
yeah.
such an inconsequential scene, we didn't even talk about it a single time, really. But like like the care and detail and precision and thoughtfulness in all these things throughout the entire
Yeah.
movie.
Well, and the same I love with the water Navi, like the their tails are wider
Yeah.
and flatter for swimming. They have like not complete fins, but their forearms are bigger to cup water better. Like all these little things that like I think we saw the water people in the first movie. Like didn't they like gather all the tribes together to fight, and we saw the water people there, but I don't think we saw them to the level of detail where like we recognize these differences in appearance and physiology. And I think that's really cool too. Like that's more world building and attention to detail. Is like, oh, you have these people that live in the water. They'd probably evolve slightly differently than the tree people. Tree people have these very long, thin tails that are really helpful in balancing because they're jumping around on trees. And
Yeah.
it's all just like it's of course borrowing from our world, right? It's just this borrowing from concepts that exist on Earth, but it's like expanding them into this whole new existence that's just really fun.
Yeah, it's very fun. That's the perfect word to end it on. A very fun way of doing it. A very fun movie.
Yeah, you got to go inside a whale's mouth to become its friend. The old Pinocchio.
Yep. That's almost certainly what they were going for there, isn't it?
All right, that is Avatar: The Way of Water. Two, I think, hearty recommends. Like we said at the beginning, you just got to see this movie. You got to see this movie in the theater. This is a capital M movie in every way possible. Thank you, James Cameron. Thank you.
Yeah, and we want him to make the subsequent movies. So
please,
this one has to make a bunch of money. So go see it.
It does have to make a lot of money. I think James Cameron specifically said it breaks even at $2 billion. I don't know how truthful he's being in that, but it does have to make a shitload of money.
All right.
And I think it's going to be successful. I think it's going to do well. It's already made, I think, 450 million over its first weekend worldwide, which is quite a lot of money. But it's not Marvel level of money. But the original Avatar was a slow roll, right? It didn't do well, and it did well because it had staying power, because it stayed high week over week over week. That's how it raked in its money. That's kind of the way James Cameron's always done it. That's the way Titanic worked as well. That it was successful because it just kept going. And we'll see. I don't think it's going to make as much money as the first one. I don't think so. The world that we live in today is different, and I don't think as many people go to the theater to experience that stuff. But I think it's going to do well still. Hopefully, well enough.
I think this is one of the very few movies in recent memory that I will go see in the theater again, and not just wait till it comes out.
I would like to. I don't think it's practical for me to do so, but I would like to.
Yeah, but even feeling the desire to, right? I think that's an indicator that more people might do that, and that'll be good for the movie.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Matt, let's wrap up things this week by revisiting our James Cameron ranking and finding where Avatar: The Way of Water belongs in this list. So before we get into Avatar's placement, I want to look back at the list, and I want to see if you still feel the same way about this list now as you felt a year ago. So for the sake of our listeners, here is our Cameron ranked list. At number 9 in dead last, we have Piranha 2: The Spawning. Then we have Ghosts of the Abyss, the documentary. Then we have The Abyss, True Lies, Avatar. Number 4 is The Terminator. Number 3 is Aliens. Number 2 is Titanic. And the best James Cameron movie is T2. So reading over that, Matt, do you think we made the right choice a year ago in everything here?
So, it's funny to me because part of me says well, I'm surprised that we put Titanic that high. But I think that I actually want to trust past Matt, because past Matt had just watched Titanic and had all of this in his brain.
Sure.
And I think I just forget how great Titanic is because it's not like a great action movie that I have watched 7,000 times.
Sure.
Like Aliens and T2. So I'm just going to trust past us. I mean, do you disagree with any of our previous rankings?
I think the 3, 2, 1 of these three movies, regardless of the order, Aliens, Titanic, and T2 are his best films. So those being in the top 3, I think is correct. I do think we were suffering, and I think we admitted this at the time, we were suffering a little bit from the Aliens director's cut is bad, actually, that we devalued that one maybe a little too much. But at the same time, Titanic is a brilliant movie. T2 is a perfect movie. I think we're generally right. I might, I'm so conflicted about The Abyss because it's a movie I really, really wanted to like, and I just didn't like it as much. You know what? I think we got it right. I think
Yeah.
Avatar being exact middle of the pack. I think The Abyss and True Lies kind of making up the tail end, along with that movie he didn't really direct, and then some of his documentaries. I think The Terminator as number 4 feels exactly right, and then we already talked about our top 3. So I think this is right generally.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you said about being somewhat indifferent toward the ranking of the top 3. Like they're all great. They're all must see movies. They're just classics.
So the question then becomes, where the hell do we slot Avatar: The Way of Water into this? And when I thought about this question before we started recording, I was really stuck here. I was really, really stuck. I had no idea where to even begin with this. But I think actually we kind of gave ourselves an easy solution to this, because we put the original Avatar smack dab in the middle of the list. And so I think the very easy solution comes from us just deciding here and now, is The Way of Water better than the first Avatar? And if the answer is yes, then I think it slots in right between Avatar and Terminator. And if the answer is no, then I think we have to have a conversation about True Lies and where that would fall. But let's answer that question first. Matt, do you think this movie is better than the original?
I do. I can think of nothing that is less good about it. The only thing, which we didn't really talk about, the only thing that makes me even like hesitate is the fact that it's 3 hours and 15 minutes long, which makes it a weird duck to compare to some of these other movies that are more than an hour shorter, right? But yeah, I liked it more than Avatar. I think it's a better movie than Avatar. I think the what he's doing with the characters is more complex. I think that the visual spectacle and the technology is just clearly more advanced and just objectively better.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. I mean, do you feel any differently?
I'm inclined to agree with you. I guess the only part I would push back against is, I think the thing that Avatar has going for it is that there was never anything like it at the beginning. This is no one ever saw anything like this. And while this movie is incredibly impressive in every way that you just said, it is more it is essentially still more Avatar. And so the question becomes, how highly do we value the wow factor of seeing Pandora and doing all this stuff for the very first time versus doing it again, but arguably with greater skill and clarity and storytelling. I think I just talked myself into it going ahead of it by the way I phrased that, but I just want to make sure we don't undervalue the importance of none of this stuff existed before that movie came out.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a valid thing to talk about. I think when I think about these rankings, I think that I tend to think about it as like in a vacuum in some sense, or like or like if the old like if you could only save such and such number of these, which ones would you save? Then it's like, well, I just think this is a better movie, and the historical factors, I think I would set those aside. But I acknowledge everything you just said. Like it's still stunningly, Avatar still looks stunningly good, stunningly. Yeah. And there's like nothing wrong with it actually, despite the fact that it came out in a time when this was unprecedented. It almost becomes more impressive as time goes on, as you see other CGI explosion fests in theaters, and you're like, that wasn't as good as Avatar, which came out 12 years ago or something. Now it's ridiculous. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. I still think that this movie goes ahead of Avatar, though.
Okay, so do we want to get crazy? Does it go further, or is 5 where we're stopping with The Way of Water, or how do we compare it to the Terminator?
I was thinking about this. I was afraid to broach the idea. um, because and the honestly, like I kind of know what recency bias feels like, if you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean. Where it's like I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like this movie is alive in my body. I love it. Like right in this moment, I love this movie. Am I gonna love this movie 5 years from now? I'm pretty confident that I'll really like this movie 5 years from now. And I'll think it was a well-made James Cameron action movie,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff may fade. Um, the Terminator was almost a genre-defining, like punch in the face to cinema and the way science fiction was done, and a real statement by James Cameron in terms of how to do action directing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the other hand, this movie is incredibly good, and it's like, well, it's the same. The craftsman who made the Terminator has now gone on and refined his skills to an unbelievable level, and now he has made this masterwork.
Mm-hmm.
So I find this really difficult to talk about and think about, honestly.
Can we at least agree that it doesn't fall into the top three? That it's not going to push out Aliens, Titanic, or T2? Can we at least come to that agreement?
Yeah, I don't. I think if only just due to nostalgia, there's no way that I'll ever unseat Aliens in T2 personally, and I'm like
Mm-hmm.
I'm like admitting the bias there, but I that's just me personally. Um, I don't know. It's interesting, man. It's very interesting because I think I just sort of like contradicted myself in terms of what constitutes like a better movie, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
now I'm talking about all these historical factors. I'm like, this is definitely a better looking movie than all those for sure.
It's so funny because yes, absolutely, but like I love the look of the Terminator in its way. Like I love the grimy, gross look. Like I love the look of it, and this is where it really becomes like this. Like auteur theory is real, obviously, and that like that both Terminator and Avatar: The Way of Water are such essential James Cameron films that despite the
Mhm,
fact that hundreds and thousands of people worked on them, they are so core to who James Cameron is as a person.
mhm.
It's like inarguable, I think, but they're also two very very different movies that have
Yeah,
very different goals. And like the Terminator is not trying to be this big huge enormous thing. It was kind of by its very nature, but it wasn't necessarily trying to be that. I, I feel like we have to put it behind Terminator. I really love that movie. I really do. And I love this movie too, but I just feel it would feel wrong for me to put Terminator ahead of it.
yeah. I think we can just note in the record that we feel complicated about this,
Mm-hmm.
while saying yeah, for sort of the historical reasons. Um, I don't know. I'm reaching for some kind of tortured metaphor about, like, if you have some beautiful early painting by some beloved painter, and then you have some clearly better later painting by that same painter, part of you is going to value that earlier painting because it's where this painter was discovering his style,
Yeah,
and that's meaningful for totally different reasons than the fact that the later painting is just clearly better.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
it's also like in this metaphor, one of the paintings is like attempting to be modern art, and the other is attempting to be like landscape or something. Like
mhm,
it's they're these movies are
yeah,
they're trying to do different things.
yeah. One of the paintings is 3 hours and 15 minutes long. So yeah,
I
yeah.
honestly didn't feel the length. I know you've talked about that as a negative several times. I didn't even notice I was in the theater for that long. I went and saw it at Alamo Drafthouse, and they do this thing where they bring the checkout 45 minutes to the end of the movie, and I know I've been there enough to know it means it's 45 minutes to the end of the movie. And when that happened, I was almost like, wow, or that already. So
Yeah.
I know we are team 90-minute film club. Like
Uh-huh.
obviously, like we more movies should be shorter, I think, is
Uh-huh.
definitely a stance that I continue to have. But this one, it didn't feel long to me at all.
Yeah, my kids did not start fidgeting until maybe the last 30 minutes, 15 minutes, which is far longer than most movies. So the
Hmm.
movie held their attention really, really well for
Yeah,
almost the
that's
whole
really
time.
impressive. That's really impressive. I think
Y-
that's the biggest sign of success you could say is that you brought three pretty young children to it, and they made it through.
Yeah, they made it through. Although there were different levels of reaction to the ending sequence, but yes, they made it through. Yes.
All right, so that's it. We're going to slot it in at number 5. So the list currently is Piranha 2, The Spawning, Ghosts of the Abyss, True Lies, Avatar, The Way of Water, The Terminator, both with asterisks next to them about how we feel conflicted about it, and then Aliens, Titanic, and T2. So that is the James Cameron list, and it will remain the James Cameron list for the next 2 years until Avatar 3, The Strength of Stone comes out.
The Land of Fire.
There you go.
No, actually, I think it has a name, by the way. I think the name is I just saw it. Wait, no, never mind. The Seed Bearer is being considered as a possible title for the film.
That's let me in the internet age, naming something the Seed Bearer is not a good call. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that.
Yeah, I guess they didn't focus group it yet.
No, I mean that's definitely going to be Sigourney Weaver's character, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, we will find out in, I believe, 2 years when Avatar 3 comes out. It's crazy that we waited 13 years for this one and we get our third in just a couple. And it might be our last, depending on how Avatar 2 ends up doing.
Yeah, isn't it cool? Kind of reminds me of when the Peter Jackson films were coming out, and you got to look forward to that.
Yeah. And I think that's what he was going for. I think that's why he kind of demanded to shoot the second and third at the same time. He wanted to do something like Jackson did there.
Yeah, cool.
And James Cameron gets what he wants. He gets big checks, he gets big movies, and hopefully he gets big rewards because hopefully this movie does well enough that he keeps getting to make them. We said this at the end of our James Cameron project. A lot of people bemoan the fact that James Cameron has decided to spend the rest of his life in Pandora. I can't wait for more. You've earned it, Mr. Cameron. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll see you in a couple of years.
Yep, I agree. Hope is not a strategy. Luck is not a factor. Fear is not an option.
All right, folks, that's all we have for you this week. If you have any opinions on Avatar, The Way of Water, please feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on Twitter @doofmedia, or on our subreddit r/doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and donate at any of the available levels. You get a bunch of cool features like bonus episodes of several podcasts. We have one for our Stephen King podcast. Matt does one with his brother called The Freeman Bros. And our friends Ruben and Elliot also do a... how do we describe The High Ground, Matt? It's a sort of a bad movie podcast, but sometimes they also do good movies.
It's like bad movies that they actually like, basically. Mm-hmm. Which some of those happen to be good movies, I think.
Yeah, it's like if you want to listen to our good friend Elliot talk about how he inexplicably believes that Jurassic Park 3 is better than the original Jurassic Park, that's the show for you.
Yes, no, it's a very good show to listen to and get mad and then go message Elliot about.
Yeah, which is exactly what I do. So
yeah, it's true.
You can do it too.
Yeah, also please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Every review does help us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That's right. Next week will be our final episode of 2022, and I think it's going to be another Doof Canon episode. We are still in the process of getting that selected, so we will tell you more about that later. But until then, we hope you all have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We didn't do anything Christmas themed this year, Matt, because Avatar is greater than Christmas.
Yeah, it's true.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We'll see you all next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.